So I think we always knew that this story was going to get worse before it could get better, and I think that the state of negotiations can easily and confidently be classified as worse at this point. But when we step back and we try to separate politics and policy, as you and Kevin just did, on the politics side, I think that the president's moves over the weekend were actually incredibly shrewd. He was able, with these executive orders and memorandum, to, I think, reset the negotiating narrative and shift some of the leverage back to the Republicans. And so to me, that means that we have a reset of the negotiations. Furthermore, and I think this is the most important point, what the president did over the weekend is not a panacea. It doesn't address a whole suite of other actions and issues relating to continued small business support, recovery rebates to individuals, funding for schools, healthcare funding, liability protection. And so I think that the political shift that we saw due to these executive actions, coupled with the fact that we still need more fiscal support, is going to lead to a deal.
Well, Isaac, the situation seems to be around state aid. No state aid over the weekend, a reluctance to provide it to the volume that the Democrats would like to see. Isn't that one area where right now it is really, really hard to negotiate over?
It's incredible. Look, there are two areas that have been concerns since the beginning with this. The first is unemployment insurance, and it appears as though we're coalescing around that $400 a week, right? So I think it's fair to move past that. State and local aid is the next one, and I think that that's the hurdle that's going to be most difficult to actually clear. But my bet at the end of the day is that there is still a foundational trade where Republicans get business liability protections and Democrats get some money for state and locals. They're not going to get the $1 trillion. That's not happening. But can they get a couple $100 billion and wrap a bow around this over the next few weeks? Yes, that is still my bet.
Isaac, let's get back to the policy from the president, because the payroll tax deferral is fascinating. The efficacy of this policy hinges almost exclusively on whether employers carry on withholding that tax or not. But there are extra dimensions to this all over the place. The other dimension is the Republicans don't even want a payroll tax cut after the next election. The president has now effectively put that up for the vote in November, hasn't he?
This is when I say what he did over the weekend is shrewd. This is example number one of the shrewdness. There was no appetite whatsoever for a payroll tax cut on Capitol Hill. Neither Republicans nor Democrats in either chamber. And so what the president did here was use statutory authority. It's the same statutory authority that actually delayed the final tax payment date beyond April 15th. Use that same authority to defer the payroll taxes on the employee side. Now, there are real operational questions, as you mentioned, in terms of will companies actually do this? How will individuals act knowing that there will still be a bill due at the end of this? But what was, I think, incredibly shrewd of the president and the White House was now the issue is pushed to the voters, and Congress is going to be forced to make the decision of whether to forgive those deferred payroll taxes. And if I had to bet my bottom dollar, I would bet that they end up deferring those taxes at the end of this year.
Isaac, what an unreal situation. As far as you're concerned, have the Democrats lost some leverage after the president's actions this weekend?
I think the unequivocal answer is yes. I think the Democrats have lost some of their negotiating leverage, but in my opinion, that is actually good for the prospects of a deal in the coming weeks, because Democrats had the square advantage in terms of having already passed the bill in early May and the infighting that we saw among Republicans. So now that we have a reset in that negotiating leverage construct, I think that actually gives us an opportunity to move forward. The next few days are going to be pivotal. Are Democrats going to go down that road of suing, which I think is politically precarious, let alone a policy disaster, or is this going to force people back to the table? My hope and expectation is that it forces negotiators back to the table.
I think we all feel that way. Isaac, final question for me. Busy week for you, and not just on this, but also on VP watch from the former VP, Joe Biden. What are you looking for this week? When do you expect the announcement?
So, look, I think that we're going to get a text message from the Biden campaign over the next few days. That's the way that they're going to roll it out. They've already begun planning the fundraising activities around it. I can tell you my sense from talking to clients is there's a great amount of interest just because this person that Biden picks is likely to be the party standard bearer in 4 years. But my sense is still that the market's going to remain focused on the electability of the top of the ticket, right? And so the questions that will still matter to investors are the arc of the virus, economic conditions, the debates this fall, and ultimately how just a handful of states end up voting in Trump v. Biden.